Hello everyone and welcome back once again. This is your history teacher here, and this time I'm here with the third part of the chapter number 2 of grade 8, that is from trade to territory. Students, as in the previous two parts of this chapter, we learn and discuss that how British adventing India and how they changed their sole purpose from trade to expansioning territory in India, and how they enforced different rules and policies on the Indian states in order to annex them. And students, we also learn that in order to expand their rule in India, how company enforced different rules and policy in India in order to annex the Indian states. And we also learn that how the Britishers claims their paramountcy in India. Now students, this is the third and the final part of chapter number 2. In this third part, we will learn how East India Company set up a new administration in India after annexing most of the Indian state. So let's start. Students, as you can see here the heading, setting up a new administration. Students, the man Warren Hastings, who was the Governor General of India from 1773 to 1785, played a very significant role in the expansion of company power in India. As you can see here in this figure, this was the man Warren Hastings. And students, during his time, the company had acquired power not only in Bengal but also in Bombay and Madras. Students, that time British territories were mainly divided into three main administrative units, and these administrative units that time were known as presidencies. And students, as I said, that the British territories were broadly divided into three administrative units, and these were Bengal, Madras and Bombay. And the students, each unit was ruled by a governor, but the supreme head of the administration was the Governor General, means Warren Hastings, who was the first Governor General who introduced several administrative reforms. Students, from 1772, a new system of justice was established by this man, means Warren Hastings. And students, according to this new system of justice, each district was to have two courts. First, a criminal court that was also known as Faujdari Adalat that time, and a civil court. And civil court was also known as Diwani Adalat that time. And students, the criminal courts were still under a Qazi and a Mufti, but under the supervision of the collectors. Students, Qazi, basically it is a Muslim term which means a judge, and a Mufti is also a Muslim term, means a jurist of the Muslim community responsible for expounding the law that the Qazi would administer. Means Mufti, basically a Muslim community who expound the law so that Qazi would administer it easily. Students, there was a major problem that time that the Brahman Pandits give different type of interpretation of their local laws based on different schools of Dharma Shastra. Students, Dharma Shastra means Sanskrit text that prescribe social rules and codes of behavior that composed from 500 BCE onwards. So according to this Dharma Shastra, the Brahmins interpret the laws differently. So in order to bring about uniformity, in 1775, 11 Pandits were asked to compile a digest of human laws. And in the same way, 1778, a code of Muslim laws were also compiled for the benefit of European judges. Hence, under the Regulating Act of 1773, a new Supreme Court was established, and a Court of Appeal was also established at Calcutta that was known as the Sardar Nizamat Adalat that time. Students, the collector was the principal figure in an Indian district, and his job was to collect revenue and taxes and maintain law and order in the district with the help of the judges, police officers and darogas. Now let's move on towards the next slide. The company army. Students, as in the previous sections, we learned and discussed that how company rule expand in India. So when company rule expand in India, these rule brought some new ideas of administration and reforms. As the Mughal army was mainly composed of cavalry. Cavalry means sawars. Sawars basically trained soldiers on horseback, means those kind of soldiers who were trained and they were basically on horseback, and they were infantries, that is also called as paddle or foot soldiers in the Mughal army. And these soldiers were given training in archery and the use of the sword, that how to use the sword in the battle. Students, but in the 18th century, changes occurred when Mughal successor states like Awadh and Banaras started recruiting peasants into their armies and training them as professional soldiers. And the East India Company also adopted the same kind of method when it began recruitment for its own army, which came to be known as Sepoy army. And this Sepoy terms basically used for the Indian soldiers. So students, as warfare technology changed from the 1820s, the cavalry recruitment of the company's army became severely declined. And this is because the British Empire was fighting in Burma, Afghanistan and Egypt, where soldiers were armed with musket and matchlocks. Students, musket basically a heavy gun used by infantry soldiers, and matchlock, it was an early type of gun in which the powder was ignited by a match. And in the early 19th century, the British began to develop a uniform military culture, means soldiers were increasingly subjected to European style training, drill and discipline that regulated their life far more than before. But student, this type of uniformity in army created lots of problems, since caste and community feelings were totally ignored in building a force of professional soldiers. And as you all know that from past times, the Indian society was totally based on caste and religious feelings. That's why these type of problems were created related to caste and community. Now moving on towards the next slide. Students, as you can see here, the heading conclusion means what you overall learned in this chapter and what was the result of overall. Students, this overall we can say that now the East India Company was totally transformed from a trading company to a territorial colonial power. And students, there were many new technology that were introduced by the Britishers in the early 19th century, and steam technology was such a type of technology that helped them to expand their transformation from company to a territorial colonial power. And students, till then it would take anywhere between 6 and 8 months to travel to India by sea. But after the steam technology, steamships reduced journey time to 3 weeks, enabling more Britishers and their families to come to a far off country like India. And thus how by 1857 the company came to exercise their direct control over more than about 63% of the territory and 78% of the population of the Indian subcontinent. And students, with its indirect influence on the remaining territory and population of India, the East India Company had virtually the whole of India under its control. Students, now your chapter number 2 of history is finished here with this third part. and I will be come back soon with a new chapter. Till then, stay home, stay safe.